Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the another episode of Product Management Interview Experience. My name is Sugat, and I'm a product manager at Meta. And today we have Kashish, who has recently graduated for Cornell University and have joined CitiBank as a product manager. Welcome, Kashish.
Thank you so much, Sugat. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. I think it's so good to finally have you on my channel. I have known Kashish from 2020 back from the PayPal days, and I've worked so closely with him that I'm so happy that he has joined product manager at Citibank and finally able to share his entire interview experience at my channel. Without any further ado, let's get started. But folks who are here for the first time, I create content on product management and interview experiences. If you haven't watched some of my previous video, don't forget to check those out and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. Kashish, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So, quick introduction about me. As you know, I'm Kashish, and I have recently joined Citi as a product manager. I graduated from Cornell last month, and I did my MBA from Cornell University. And before that, I was part of PayPal, where I worked in both the domains, product development as well as product management. And yeah, that's pretty much about me in a nutshell. And yeah, just one thing. Right now, I'm working in wholesale credit risk, and before this, my domain was identity and access management. So yeah, that's all about me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks, Kashish, for being part of the channel. Why MBA and US? I'm pretty sure you must have thought about this, uh,
Yeah.
but happy to hear from you that what were your motivations behind all this?
Sure. So I'll answer your question in two parts. First thing, why MBA? When I actually started, getting into the product world, but I was an SD, right? So at that point in time, I realized that my horizons are very limited, right? I have very limited knowledge and I don't actually know the end-to-end picture for various different products. So when I started taking ownership of the product that I used to own, and still the product knowledge I have was just limited to that product, right? How things work just inside PayPal and not the end-to-end picture. So that was one of the biggest motivation for MBA, because MBA is not just something you read on a piece of paper and just memorize it and just execute it. It's based on your real life experience, right? And I wanted to learn this in the field with lots of different people from various backgrounds, and get positive from every different bucket. So that was the reason for MBA. And why US? Multiple reasons behind it. Number one was the various kinds of opportunities that we get in US. I'm not saying that other countries don't offer a lot of opportunities, but US as a single country has people from all different backgrounds. You not just get the opportunities, but you get a chance to work with, I would say, people from all different backgrounds, right? And that is a different kind of exposure, like all different kind of exposure. And one last thing, I'll be pretty honest with you. So when I was comparing average salaries of different continents, right? So US, I would say, like North America, US was the one which actually stood out as comparison to Canada, or if I compare Europe, or if I compare India. So these were my top reasons, like why I actually wanted to go for US. Yeah, of course, Cornell was here. I wanted to be a part of top school.
Amazing, and kudos to you, and congratulations on completing this tough journey. I'm pretty sure the one last 1.5 2 years would have been very crazy. I definitely wanted to talk about this, but I think we have more important topics to cover in this today's podcast. So let's keep the focus on that.
Sure.
Yeah, awesome. So, let's talk a bit about the placement process in US. Right? How was your experience so far? Because known that the placement process in India in the B schools are way different than how it happened in the US, especially after your graduation or your course is completed. Walk us through the entire process which you had to go through in this entire duration.
Sure. So when it comes to placement in US, there won't be, in mostly the companies won't be coming there and keeping placement rounds for you. You who has to take the initiative, who has to reach out to companies, who have to make your network, grab the interview opportunities and then showcase your skills. So when it comes to step by step procedure, number one thing was to make sure I get good amount of network in most of the companies, right, which I was targeting. That was number one thing. Second thing was to make sure I found a relevant role that fits my experience, that fits what I bring to the table, right? And third thing was, of course, to get the referral, to get it going, just apply to it. And it was a numbers game at this point in time. If you apply to, let's say, 50 jobs, you might hear back from 10 of them, right? So this is a usual, I would say, recruitment cycle, how it happens in the US. Apart from that, there are a couple of things. So there are a couple of companies who come to the campus on during the career fairs, but due to bad market, I mean, you know that, right? There were no big names coming in there. So the only path that gave me result was this: to make network, to apply via referrals, or sometimes a cold apply, but just to apply to companies and get the interview opportunities, because that's the first step how you actually get an opportunity to showcase your skills and get it going.
Cool. Can you please expand a bit on that, Kashish?
Sure. I followed like a couple of strategies, right? If I have to dive deep into it. Number one was all my previous colleagues, I would say, those people who have managed me or I have worked very closely with, I used to like talk to them and used to tell them like if there is any opening in your company, or sometimes used to give them some opening which I may know of. That if you can give a recommendation to the hiring manager or just drop in a message internally, that would actually highlight my profile and give me at least an introductory call where I can prove myself. This was number one thing from which I got a couple of calls. Second thing was looking out for companies which match my domain I was in. So as I told you, I was a part of identity and access management, like security and all that. The teams, I mean the companies which would have this role, I would use to apply either via refer or cold apply. And in this specific segment, I have gotten around like 90% hit ratio, right? Because to every role I have applied for, which was for IAM, I have heard back mostly. I have got the interviews and I have went till the last round. And thirdly, it is basically, I would say, again, like it's a generic thing. I used to do a number of applications, of course, just to increase my numbers game, just to have a better chance. So these were my typical strategies that I used to follow. And just one thing I would like to highlight here, which is having a good resume is game changer in this market, because your resume is not just seen by a human. Before that, it has to pass that ATS stage, right? So I have worked relentlessly on my resume, got number of feedback. I have gotten your feedback and couple of other people's feedback on my resume, and that was another thing that was a major segment of how I went in this placement cycle.
Awesome. Great to hear about that. And I think you actually shared a lot of relevant tips, which I say to most of the aspiring PMs or the PMs who are looking for a transition. The major call out was that start looking for your domain specific fitment, right? Because in the last 2 years, there has been a major shift when product managers or the hiring managers generally look for a fitment or a person who has some previous experience and background in the relevant product. So if you are someone who is still struggling with your PM transition, first play on your strengths, which mean focus on the product that you are building or you're working on, and try to look for the open roles that you're similar to your product and experience. Kashish, let's keep moving. So following all this process which you did, walk us through your entire interview experience at Citibank. How did you even reach out to the recruiter or found came across this role, and then maybe look forward to hearing some of the specific interview process and the questions of this round.
Sure. So I'll again take it in parts. Just a note. So my interview process at Citi was the fastest one, and the smoothest as compared to other companies, because the rounds were mostly product sense and behavioral. But yeah, to answer your question, first thing, I was actively looking, like, since PayPal is a fintech company, right? Irrespective of my domain at PayPal, there are synergies between fintech companies. So hence, I was targeting Citi and other kind of banks. First thing I did, I was reading through their roles, and I found a couple of roles which actually suited my profile. Maybe not in terms of the domain, but in terms of what they want the person to bring on the table, right? That was my first step. Second thing was to get a connection at Citi, whom I can actually understand what's the culture there, and I can tell them, like, these are the skills I bring to the ground, and this is how my background looks like. And I asked them for a referral, and the person was kind enough to refer me for all the roles. After I applied, the very next week, I got the recruiter email saying that my profile has been shortlisted and there would be rounds scheduled in the upcoming weeks. So I got 4 rounds, two for the next week and two for the 1 week after that, right? So this was how my rounds look like. And yeah, like I'll just take a pause to check with you, like where exactly do you want to dive in?
No, let's keep going on. Love to hear the discussion which you had with the recruiter and with the following upcoming interviews.
Sure. Strangely, my recruiter round for Citi was at the last. I would say not a recruiter round, but that was more of a check the culture fit or something like that. That was my fifth round, but my first round here was a product sense of behavioral round with one of the hiring managers, right? So yeah, as I told you, it was a product sense and behavioral round. Like they didn't have a specific, I would say high levels of like product casing or that kind of rounds, but the round was mostly conversational based. So in this, the interviewer was trying to understand how I deal with different priorities, right? I mean, when there are competing priorities, how do I actually make sure I take the right thing into what parameters do I go through and I actually take the right request to work upon, right? So they asked me a couple of questions there, how I have what's my process going into these kind of scenarios, how I deal with these kind of scenarios. And they asked me one question which I remember was, how do I go about prioritizing requests for an upcoming quarter, right? Which is, I think, a very very basic skill in every product management job, right? This was one question I remember, and then the conversation shifted to how do I manage different stakeholders, how do I actually work with them, because and some part of it was around this also, how do we actually work with different requests coming in from stakeholder, right? So this was mostly of my first round, and a couple of things which the other touched upon were like, what risks do I foresee in a process or in a new project, in a new feature that we're going to do. And second, lastly was how do I deal with the tech teams. So this was majorly the first round, which was around 30 to 45 minutes. And yeah, so it went pretty good. After that, I had the second round, which was again kind of conversational round, and the interviewer, they were more focused on asking me my experience. They were asking me about a time when I had done an actual redesign of some legacy process or automated some legacy process. And now that I'm in the company, I understand why they were asking me that, because my role is exactly that. So they asked me like a time when I had to redesign something from scratch. I had to redesign something, right? And how do I went about that process? Again, they were focusing mostly on risks. What risks do you foresee? How do you check with multiple stakeholders? The typical product sales questions were the first half of the second round. And after that, they switched gears. They asked me a mini case on metrics, like not a heavy case, but a mini case. They told me that this is the product they have. These are different users. What would be the key metrics I am going to measure for the end user here? And I had to, just ask some clarifying questions and how we go through the process. And lastly, they asked me one good question, like which I actually had to take a pause and then answer them, which was, having gone through a stringent curriculum at Cornell and all my PayPal experience, what would be the one thing that I would do differently now that I have gained more exposure? I have broadened my horizons, right? And here I took a pause and I reflected back on my PayPal experience, and then I told them like this would be something which I would like to clarify even before going forward and releasing a feature. So yeah, these are my first 2 rounds. A quick pause just to check in, like, is there should I just go on, or you want me to just focus on something else?
No, I'm really excited to hear all these questions and how you were able to answer them. Let's keep proceeding to the
Yeah.
upcoming rounds as well.
So yeah, so after these 2 rounds, I got another email from the HR that the managers are happy with my performance and they would like to schedule 2 more rounds, and I got 2 rounds for the next week. The first round in this later half of the stage was basically focused on the domain, which is a different one from what I have worked upon. And basically, I would say it was the resilience, like how I would actually treat a new domain. So I was very transparent with them that I don't have much idea about wholesale credit risk. So they were asking me about what was this one time where you had to learn a new skill, and how did you went about that. I understood that they're trying to understand how will I actually do what process would I actually follow when I actually step into the game, right? So I told them over a time when I was working at PayPal, right, and I had to understand this domain also initially. So I just described that time, and after that they actually wanted to test how much study I have done on in this domain for this interview. So they blatantly asked me, okay, tell me what all do you know about wholesale credit risk as a domain. So I had done my research. Of course, in the first two rounds of interview, I gathered some notes from the interviewers. I combined all of that and gave them a proper answer, like what I understand, what are the major steps in this domain. I gave them a very clear answer with different buckets from end to end, how a loan originates to how a loan ends, how a booking process ends. Told them about various compliances which are actually followed in this domain, which I think impressed the interviewer. After that, their question was majorly based on what compliances I have actually worked upon, because I come from a security background, like I entered in access management. So they wanted to understand what compliances I worked upon, and I walked them through that, like how it happens back at PayPal. Yeah, this was pretty much about the third round. One more thing which they focused on here was, since in Citi for their particular role, there were a number of stakeholders. So they wanted to understand how I actually deal with various stakeholders who are technical, non-technical, people who understand the process and don't understand the process. So this was about this. And after that, I had the final round with the hiring director. And so it was not basically an interview, but I would say it was a complete conversation where she was first explaining what their product is, and then I started asking them my plethora of questions, like what are their current pain points, why do they want this role, and why do they want this role now itself, like what has changed in their organization. And then we were discussing about how someone new in this game can actually ramp themselves up pretty fast. What is the procedure of any person joining their team? Are there some specific set of trainings, or do I start the preparation beforehand? So I think this was the overall process. Just one thing I would like to highlight here, and I think this was an advice given by you to me in one of the interviews regarding the priorities. When they asked me how do you prioritize different requests, I gave them an honest answer instead of giving them a bookish answer. Where, so in books, how do we answer it? We talk to customers, we prioritize them, and then we give them, we lay out, okay, we will be doing this. I told them, see, let's say if we have 100%, 50% bandwidth will be taken by the leadership. You have the remaining 50% where you will take the input from stakeholders, from the end users, and you are going to make a mix of what you should proceed with. You should prioritize that. But 50% every time would be taken by the leadership, aimed by the leadership, what leadership is actually focusing upon. So my interviewer, I believe, actually loved that, because she highlighted on that like two times. She was like, I love this answer because you're being honest and you're not being someone who has just read from the book and telling me how it happens. So this was the entire interview process. Yeah. After that, I told you, right? After that, I got the HR call, and she was just saying how comfortable I am with the team. She was asking my working style, whether I'm comfortable with this location, and is this the role that I was actually thinking before the interview process. So just checking whether the expectations matches the reality, and this was all about it. Any specific questions you have?
Amazing. I think you already spoke a lot about the entire interview process along with the detailed procedure. Just like one final thought which coming to my mind right now, especially like you were a student looking for a job in US. How does the sponsorship plays around with this particular thing? If you can throw some light in that direction.
Okay, that's the pain point of all the international students. Yeah, I would say if there are 100 jobs, 85 to 90 of them get cut out just because of this reason, because companies don't want to sponsor, right? Of the remaining 10-15%, it's still hard to crack the interview. I mean, it's still hard to crack the offer, because you will go till the end stages, but they would again find someone who is either a citizen, or those who don't need the sponsorship, or those who have some other scenarios, right? And you will get cut off. So I would say this scenario plays a big factor, and that's why international students mostly try to go with big names in the beginning, because all these companies were established, they actually sponsor people, and this is one of the critical things for us to be relevant in the game, right? Because if we don't have sponsorship, we would have to leave this country in like 3 months. That's the duration you can stay unemployed, right? From 3 months or 6 months, I don't know about the exact numbers there, but yeah, it plays a big factor. and not a positive
Yeah,
thing.
might be very cutthroat, right? Especially your deadline is approaching and
So yeah,
the interview's pressure. Congratulations, Kashish, again going through all of this and cracking the PM interview at Citibank.
thank you so much, and thank you for all the mentorship and all the guidance you have given me. Because I mean, you are the one whom I have been talking since the beginning, right? I've always asked you about how should I approach these kind of questions, these kind of cases. But yeah, thanks to you a lot.
Glad I was able to help and yeah, impact in any way. During this entire journey, I'm pretty sure you must have reached out to some other companies as well.
Yeah.
So if you can talk about those through and again, right, in this entire interview journey, there might be some questions which you found really interesting. If you can share some of those as well, so that it helped candidates to understand what can some other type of questions are also being asked.
Sure. So I would say, to answer the first part of the question, yes, I did reach out to other companies and I got interviews from a number of companies. Like I got interviews from Indeed, from Coinbase, GoFundMe, from Tesla, from JP Morgan, from Stride Funding, from Injective Labs, and another number
Are
of
you still
companies.
saying, are you still saying market is dead after
I
getting interviews from so many companies?
I mean, I have been drilling hard for this since my day one, right? So, I mean, I have been focusing on the interview, focusing on the resume, which was the critical thing. People don't pay enough attention to resume. They feel if you have the brand name, if you have done the right work, you will get the calls. No, you will straight away get the rejection. I have spent equal amount of time on my resume as much as I have spent on the interview preparation, right? But yes, uh, getting back at it, so I did get a lot of calls, and in terms of questions, I would say yes, product sense and behavioral were part of almost every interview, right? Because some companies conduct like 6 round of interviews. Credit Karma conducted like 7 round of interviews, right? So 3 or 4 of them were like product sense and behavior. But other than that, couple of questions that I would just like to talk about. Number one, as we say, product casing, right? So in GoFundMe, I was asked this question: How would you improve the you know user sign up or login experience of our existing website? This was one question which I was asked, and I had to run my brain through it. I have to run through it and understand like there's a usual structure that we follow, but since I have idea about authentication and authorization, so I was able to give some inputs here. Other thing was, apart from the product casing, right? In JP Morgan, I was asked all consulting cases for some reason in almost all of the rounds. I was asked, they gave me a problem statement like these are the graphs, this is the current, this is the there's a city, and some questions like that. How would you increase the foreign investments in that city? They would give me different kind of the bar graphs, the pie charts, and they would ask questions on that. On top of that, I've seen like SQL cases for product management, right? I was being asked SQL cases where they gave me the problem statement and I had to not I had to code through it, but I have to tell my process and ultimately how I would be getting to the final answer. On top of that, I would say in some of the interviews, I was asked about a system design where they would tell me there's an application, this is the feature, how would I go through it? So I have to tell them like all different components of the application. So apart from product sense and behavioral, these are the other things that I have experienced throughout my interview journey. Just to bucketize it, like product casing, consulting type cases, lastly, which is system design. So this covers my entire interview journey.
Interesting system design because based on some of my understanding, I think system design was the only, I think Google was the only company who used to ask system design thing. But I think last 2 years, they have even dropped out that particular round. So I'm still curious why other companies are still asking system design. Was it a more of a technical PM role or
So yeah, I understand your question. So this was more of a this was a technical PM role, but I understand when you say system design was dropped out, right? And I remember like we also had this discussion at the start of my MBA journey. So this was one of the proper system design interview question. Like how when we interview for SD roles or for engineering manager roles, you have those designer, system designer, an app for this. Not like that. It was a very high level stuff where they wanted to check, do I understand the tech behind it, or I'm just someone who's just talking about the concepts from the or very superficial point of view. So it was not a deep drill where I have to do, some back of the envelope calculations, understand how many requests are coming in, based on that have load balances and all that. No, it was a very high level stuff. But since I have good proficiency in this domain, so I dived deep into it, which the interviewer actually liked, because this was a technical EM role.
Got it. No,
Yeah.
thanks a lot for clarifying that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's move towards the final section of of our discussion. What are some of your tips to the aspirants who are planning to come to US or actually pursuing their MBAs or masters in US? Yeah, based on your hard work which you have seen in the last 1.5, 2 years, what would you advise them?
Got it. No, that's a great question. And I would say, to answer this question again, there are two, just talking like a PM, there are two different user segments who I want to give advice to. Number one, people who are back in their home countries, and I can speak for the people who are in India and planning to come to US. So number one thing is US, if your it depends on your aim. If your aim is just the money, probably US is not the best option because the expenses here are equally high, right? But if you want the exposure, you want the opportunities, you want to see different style of working, you want to understand how people from different background think, right? How does it actually feel to work in a team where you would not find someone with the similar ethnicity, like everyone in the team is from different background? Then US is the place for you, right? So in short, if you're looking for the exposure which might help you in the longer run, yes, US is the place for you. You should come here. But if you're just looking for money, it's better like if you do, you drill down in your research, and then you should ideally decide what's best for you. Secondly, people who are in the US pursuing their masters, I can speak for the ones who are doing MBA and trying to get a job here. Number one advice which I would give them is be interview ready since day one. I cannot emphasize more on this fact. You never know when will you start getting the interviews. When you will talk to your alumni or with your peers, they would say interview process will start, after 6 months, after 9 months. So there is no point in, prepping up right now. But in my case, that was not the scenario. I got my first interview call like 30 months, oh, sorry, 30 months, 30 days into the program. I got my first interview call. So I realized one thing: you have to be interview ready at every point of stage. That's the one advice I would give them. Second thing, expand your network. And when I say expand your network, just don't concentrate all your bets in one company. Make sure you have networks in different companies, so that what matters. It just doesn't matter you get the referral. It matters the speed of the referral as well. Because in the current scenario, if there's a job opening, you would see 100 and 500 of people will apply in just 1 hour, right? You have to apply as quickly, and as quickly as you can get the referral, your chances will increase, right? Diversify your networks in different companies. Lastly, I would say keep applying. Yes, there is an angle of numbers game to it. The more you apply, the more your chances are. And like, it's not guaranteed, but yeah, that's the advice I would give from my experience. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Kashish, again being part of this channel and sharing your experience to the wider audience. I hope people still watching this, you would benefit a lot and lot from this entire channel, especially how the job market in US is and how the entire interview process look like. If there are any things you want to connect with Kashish, I will be sharing his LinkedIn profile on the channel's description. So feel free to reach to him for any personal advice and guidance. Uh, till then, thank you again, Kashish. See you. All the best, and yeah, keep rocking. Thank you.
Thank you so much.